Hi, this is Sharon. I'm going to do a hopefully quick video on mill levy math. For most libraries, the budget's funded from many sources, but funding from the taxing authority, your city, your township, or if you're a district library, your district, makes up the largest part of that budget. Ideally, the library's budget starts with expenses. What projects, services, and staff do you need to run the library for next year, and how much is that going to cost? Then we'll look at the non-tax funds. So all those things that aren't tax dollars, grants, allocation, gifts, maybe you have an endowment fund, and some of the interest from that is transferred over into the general fund every year. Your state aid, interest, whatever. Everybody has, this is slightly different what your sources of income are. So you've looked at that. What's left? What's the difference between the needs of the library, those available funds, including carryover? That difference is paid for with tax money. Well, tax money is also a mix of funds. That's this yellow box. You have your ad valorem tax, the very first one, which are your property taxes. And then you also have motor vehicle taxes and recreational vehicle taxes and delinquent taxes. So the lion's share, though, of tax support comes from property taxes. They are worth millions of dollars. And the mill rate determines what percentage of those millions are needed to fund the library's budget after taking into account all those other taxes and sources of revenue. So let's break that down a little bit further. So we talked a little bit about ad valorem. Um, What does ad valorem mean? It's Latin for according to value, and it is a tax based on the value of a property. So in Kansas, the ad valorem tax is linked to the assessed valuation of property, which is in itself a formula. A property's appraised or fair market value is multiplied by an assessment percentage. And we have several rates in the state that determine what that assessed valuation is. So residential property in Kansas has an assessment rate of 11.5%, while industrial property or commercial property is 25%. So you can see why communities want a thriving business community, because it results in more higher assessed valuations. So before an ad valorem tax can be levied, we need that assessed valuation for all of the properties in the taxing area, both commercial and residential and agricultural and all these other different kinds of property. So why this is important: if your community is losing population, that assessed valuation, those millions might decline. But if you have new construction in your community, that assessed valuation may be increasing. This will impact that mill levy math that we're looking at. So mill levy rates, or what is this? What are we talking about? Mill levy rates. The mill rate is the amount of tax payable per dollar of assessed value of a property. So the mill rate determines what percentage of that assessed valuation total is needed to fund the library's budget, minus those other taxes and sources of revenue. It's the amount of tax payable per dollar of assessed value of a property. The word mill is, again, Latin, and it means thousandth, or 1/10 of 1%, or 1/1000, or if you like decimals, 0.001 of an amount. And you can see some examples here. So if you have an assessed valuation of 4.45 million, 1 mil of that will raise $4,450. You just got to move the decimal point over. When we talk about determining the mill rate, we are determining what portion or percentage of the total property taxes would be needed to fund the library's budget. The library doesn't need $1 million. It might want it, but it doesn't need it. So how much does it need? Math. We get to do word problems. It's so much fun. We have a library budget that the board has said needs $6,000 in tax support. So That's it, in budget. We have the amount of tax money needed. That's the $6,000. We have the assessed valuation, and that's 1.4 million. So that's all the value of all the properties in the community. So what we need to solve for is that mill rate, and we use this formula. The amount of tax to be levied divided by the assessed valuation times 1,000 will give us the mill rate. And this is, remember, we're just looking at the ad valorem. So there's our answer. The city will need at least 4.286 mills to raise that $6,000 for the library. Why is it at least? Because there are those unknowns. How much are the estimated other taxes, like motor vehicle? And the assessed valuations that are used, this $1.4 million, is just an estimate. This number may go up or down. This is provided in June to the clerks in all the cities and counties. And in November, you have a final assessment. So this mill levy rate may go up or down depending on the difference between June and November. So this is another good reason why we recommend that you and your board take a look at the budget using the actual numbers in November or in early December so you really know how much you can expect to receive the next year for your budget. So what if there is a mill levy cap? I know it happens, we don't like it, but sometimes that happens. So I have an example of a word problem where the library budget is limited through a charter ordinance to a cap of 4 mills per year. So how much funding will this Ike Public Library receive? We know that the assessed valuation for this community is $1,323,770. And we know that the mill rate is 4. So we have a slightly different formula where we take the mill rate and multiply that times the assessed valuation divided by 1,000. So that will give us the amount of tax to be levied. And the answer for that is $5,295 in ad valorem taxes. And again, everything has a caveat. There's a plus or minus delinquent taxes. Sometimes people can't pay their taxes, and that means that if they don't pay their taxes, you can't receive that money. Sometimes people pay back taxes, so maybe you'll receive a little bit more than this. It's kind of a plus or minus on if you'll actually receive $5,295. But that's a good reason to keep track of when you receive your tax money and how much you get each time. Okay. So what does this mean to a homeowner? You just out of curiosity. As a taxpayer, you might be curious to know how much support you're giving the library through your property taxes. So here's the problem, as stated in a word problem. Your home is valued at $100,000. So what is the tax bill if the mill levy rate is 4 mills? Okay. So we have to do a couple of different calculations. First, we have to apply that residential property assessment rate of 11.5% to our $100,000 home. So there you go. $100,000 times 11.5% is $11,500. Next, we need to determine what 1 mil would be. So we take that 11,500 and we divide it by 1,000. That gives us $11.50. So 1 mil against my home would be $11.50. Well, we have 4 mills, so I needed to multiply that 1150 times 4, and we get $46. So the cost of 1 large print book and 1 regular copy of a book. I always like to put things in terms of how many books can I buy for that $46. And this is another reason why you should add that value calculator if you're a seek and find library, or maybe put it on your website, because the library is one of the best deals in town. So there is, I call this the Teeter Totter principle. Mill levy math is full of moving parts. And what this slide shows you is that there are some fluctuations. And if there's changes in that valuation, it can change or impact the mill levy rate. So we talked about our Ike Public Library. They needed $6,000. They have 1.4 million in assessed valuation according to that June 15th estimates. So when the budget's created, there's this estimated tax rate of 4.286 mils. Okay, there's the math. So let's say it's November and you have scenario one. The assessed valuations come in higher than what they were estimated. There's 1.45 million. So that means that final tax rate is going to go down because the amount of money that you need stayed the same. You still needed $6,000. So the formula of 6,000 divided by 1.45 million times 1,000 gives you a mill levy of 4.138. Well, let's look at the second scenario. What happens if those assessed valuations come in less than what was estimated? Then your final tax rate is going to go up. It's your taxing authority is going to need to raise that mill rate to 4.364 to generate the $6,000 that you need. It's a teeter-totter. It's called an inverse relationship between the mill rate and the assessed valuations. And that's why we need to be aware that when the city is generating and filling out all of its forms, which we'll see in a minute, it's using estimated numbers. And then in November, you get the finals. So I promised you a real life example, and here we have the budget summary from a city library here in our system. And I got this from the Municipal Services page of the state website. Okay, so this was the budget that was published in the local paper. It shows the city's budget along with the libraries. I have the library outlined in red. The city levies taxes on behalf of the library. The township levies taxes on behalf of the township. The district levies taxes for itself. That's the difference, who's the taxing authority is. For cities, it's based on that law, 12-1220. And the library has told the city that it needed $265,000 to run the library in 2025. So under proposed budget authority for expenditures, $265,000. That's taking into consider other revenues like carryover and motor vehicle taxes. So the ad valorem need was reduced from 265,000 to 199,564. Right there. The assessed valuations for this community were 16,926,288. And that's just for 2025. That's the estimate. So we're going to do our math, and we have a mill levy rate of 11.79. All of this is published so me, you, your neighbor, as the taxpayers, can see all of the expected expenses and what those proposed tax rates are going to be. So to recap, a mill levy, or the proposed estimated tax rate as it shows on this publication, is the percentage of the assessed valuation number, that big fat $16 million needed to generate the ad valorem or property taxes needed to fund the library's budget. We looked at two different equations or two different scenarios. In both, we knew what the assessed valuation was, but in the first example, we determined what the tax rate would need to be to generate $6,000 needed for the library. And in the second example, we had a mill levy rate cap, which meant we could only have as much money as 4 mills would generate. And in that one, we had a budget of only $5,295. Tax funds are just one part of the income puzzle. You have your motor vehicle taxes and your watercraft taxes, your carryover funds, grants, allocation, endowment fund transfers, fines and fees, interest, and other revenue sources that you got to look at. What the city cares about is your tax fund need. So just remember that. Know that you can ask your taxing authority for this municipal services workbook, and you can go and find the library fund page, and you can look at this budget summary, and you can have this as part of your budget. And I think that's a really good thing to think about doing. I want where it's underlined in green. Notice that it says this is estimated tax rate. It's subject to change depending on the final assessed valuations. So that other part of this moving target is the difference between the estimates from June and the final numbers that come in November. My hope is that this focus on one part of the whole budget process will make it a little bit clearer and easier to understand, and will help you feel more empowered when you're talking with your city clerk, your county clerk, your township support staff, whoever, about the library's budget. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at smorland@sekls.org or call the SEKLS office, and I will be happy to talk to you about this. Thank you so much.